Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, Andrew.
How's everybody doing?
We're good.
Good.
Excellent. Now, here he is. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey, Rick, how are you? You're mobile today.
I am sitting in my work van.
I hear you. And Karen's at her workbench.
That's right.
I've seen you in that position on camera before.
Well, the hour is upon us. We have everybody here, I think. So let's get started. I thank you all for meeting on relatively short notice, and I hope to keep this meeting brief. It's really just to kind of get the ball rolling, let you all know where we are now, what we've done, and where we're headed, and get some input. To give you all some background, you know, the reason that we're calling this cemetery master plan committee is because we have realized that we are running out very quickly, running out of space in the portion of the cemetery that folks refer to as Pauper Field. So we realize there's going to be a need to address that issue. And we also realize that we ought to be thinking about the future of the cemetery because there's approximately 30 years of space left in the cemetery, which is a nice long amount. But we might as well start thinking about the future of our cemetery now while we're looking at this particular issue. So what we did was we contracted with Branstetter and Carroll for a very reasonable amount to come and essentially do a master plan. What can we do with the adjoining property that the city owns? The portions of the property that front on shucks, I can't remember the name, Markham Drive, and then the portion that is to the north that is next to the ball field. And how can we coordinate that and make plans for the future of the cemetery? We don't necessarily have to do all of the plans now. We don't have to construct all of the expansion, but we can move forward on phases without negatively affecting the overall plan for the cemetery. So if we know that there's a 10 or a 20-year plan, whatever we do today, we can do so knowing that we aren't going to mess that up. And Gene, who should be joining us, but he is actually finishing up a funeral. He will call in when he can. There's long been a plan for a road to go through there by Pauper Field and extend on over to the area of Markham Drive. I think that space limitations have just brought this conversation to us sooner than we were expecting. And to give you all an update, I met with Gene and Pat Hoagland from Branstetter Carroll on site on a beautiful morning about 2 weeks ago, and we walked the whole property and we looked at the old pool where it's been filled in, and we looked at the ball fields, we looked at roads, We looked at tree lines and utilities and all the things attendant to what might we do there. And we just gave him an idea of what the problem was. But you all are the ones that are going to have to shape and help Pat and the Branstetter folk understand what vision is. I could only kind of give them a sense of what's the issue and what are our limitations and what's my sense of what people want. So the point of this committee is to kind of get you all plugged into that conversation early on, and that's essentially a summary of where we are today. So I tell you what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it over to the mayor, and I'm gonna open up my notes and start taking notes as you all talk. Work for you all?
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. For the magistrate's benefit, Rick and Dwayne, what the council has talked about previously is we know what a huge community resource Georgetown Cemetery is. It's very important historically, and we didn't think that we, along with Gene Cook, who's a wonderful sexton and runs the cemetery in a very good way, but we didn't think we were qualified to make long-term decisions about how the cemetery should grow into the future. So we thought it was worthy of an investment of a little money to get Pat Hoagland on board with us. Pat is a landscape architect that is specialized in master plans and park master plans. Years ago, Pat actually helped write the master plan for Parks and Recreation that led to the development of the pavilion and several of their other big structures. So he's got a very practical approach to his work. The UCO Inn board, that is now a not-for-profit, recently had Pat help us go through an exercise and look at a master plan for how UCO Inn should continue to develop. So kind of his area of specialty is to help guide us with exactly decisions of this type. So we went ahead and hired him, but realizing that anything we do with our cemeteries are done under an interlocal agreement with the county, we wanted to share this conversation with you all, particularly since the indigent burials are a court policy. And while we have room for that, we have to be able to accommodate what has been a pretty rapid increase in the number of indigent burials. So Andrew, was Pat expected to be on to show us some preliminary work on, or just to introduce himself?
No, I had told him that we were going to meet and then we would get back to him. I didn't think to invite him to this. I probably should have. I figure we can meet again if we need to. The meeting that we had, I think, was very preliminary, and I told him we didn't really want him to start taking any direction until we had met.
Okay. Well, all of you have an interest in the cemetery. I know that for Karen, it's been a real important part of her life. Karen, anything you'd like to say on the front end of this?
Yeah, a couple of questions. So we're here today. We're talking about how we're going to connect to Sepulveda Park, as well as how we're going to put a road to the back of that to go out onto Markham. I went up there and it almost looks like there's not really much place that you can actually drive into Sepulveda Park the way the grades are now, unless you went down to that road that's by the office. But is that kind of what we're thinking of, asking him to look at how to use the Sepulveda pool in the park behind it, plus how we make another entrance exit?
Let me pull up a map real fast, Karen, while you talk. That might be an easier way to do this.
And Karen, I think the answer to your question is going to be yes.
Okay.
To all of those things, recognizing the growth of the growth of our usage of the land up there, and how we best plan for that and still have a beautiful cemetery for decades to come. I didn't want us to make short-term decisions that really sacrificed the things that we'd want to do later.
You all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So right here, of course, is the area that we're talking about, which is where the indigent barriers are held. There's a tree line that goes all the way down through here. There's no fence, but there's a tree line. This is the old Suffaletta pool, of course. And then you have the ball fields. And then you have a connection here, Louis B. Nunn, back to Lemons Mill.
You're giving me a headache.
Sorry about that. So I'll slow down. So
And
right
Rick's
here,
on a
you can see my cursor, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the original plan called for a road to go from here through there down to Markham Drive.
Okay.
The idea would be obviously there's an L-shaped piece here, right? There's an L-shaped or backwards L, but you get it. That is essentially in play. So you have this area, which is essentially just a park right now. Public Works just mows it. But the city owns this, the city owns this, and the city owns this. So we talked about the idea. Dean said, if you're going to have burials here, or you're going to have burials here, you would need a loop, essentially. Whatever we do, there would have to be simply putting a road from here to here is not going to really solve any issues. So they talked about the idea of being able to either loop back to here or loop out to Lemons Mill, or even just have a way for the staff to get from here back over to the maintenance building here via a cut through. You also have this pavilion here, which the park department uses, but Gene expressed that it could be a multifunction cemetery type facility as well for funerals that occur in bad weather. So these are just sort of elements that we all have to think about. But to get to your question, Karen, yes, logistics of how you get in and out is a big part of this.
Okay. Have they said anything about how hard it will be to use the old pool area for cemetery lots?
In their estimation, as long as we can dig out the pool itself, which is a lot of earthwork, there is a shelf here in this area of rock. There's rock that's keeping Gene from being able to do a lot of burials. It's really difficult to get through that rock. We don't know. Part of it will have to be soundings and borings in this area to see what we're dealing with. But to me, the idea that there was a pool there at one point says they were able to get through it. But that's all going to be part of the equation too. As long as that concrete can be taken out, it can be usable space.
I think years ago, I think city took the cheapest way out years ago, and that was rather than completely remove the pool, simply fill it with dirt and put off until today, when we had to actually deal with it.
There is if you look at your map that you've got here, you can see the graves are already pretty thick back on where you're talking about where that shelf is, and then on behind the houses on Markham. And the only place that's through there looks like there is a small amount of space, right in there, that you could take the road into that grassy area, and then you could swing it back into Cephaletta Park. They take it into that grass, and then you could swing the road back into it, and then that would give you a little bit more space into this green space off of Markham, into that green space there to put more graves. But I would be curious as to how tough it's going to be to bury back into that, because eventually, in like 50 years down the road, say there's 30 years left there. I don't think there's quite 30 years at the rate we're going. I don't think there's quite 30 years worth of burials there. But let's say there's 20 years worth of it. The logical, when the cemetery really expands, is to go into the ball fields eventually. So I think that's kind of the idea. Bring it into Markham, into that green space, take it back towards the ball fields. So in the future, 30 years from now, the ball fields need to be moved, and then that would contain the cemetery altogether for another probably 50 years. It's just my thoughts.
Yeah. So Karen, you think eventually the ball fields are going to come into play?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't think it's for the next 20 years, but eventually I think we're going to have to, if we're going to contain the Georgetown Cemetery in one location for as long as possible, then yes, I say work into the Cephaletta Park with the idea of another phase eventually going back and taking the ball fields and then moving the ball fields. Judge, you can move the ball fields, can't you? Just overnight.
We could put another cloverleaf at Great Crossing Park to accommodate Parks and Rec's need for additional space. That's, that was the original part of the plan, and Judge Lusby made accommodations and had that graded while they were there. It's sitting there, and Rick can speak to it because he was on the court at the time, but that was the plan, and it's been graded in preparation for that. So
Well, I think it's a future. That's where it's going to be. And then the other access that's already there, the end street that's already there to go back into the ball field, is there right below Gene's workshop that he has down there. So if you could think about taking this out, so eventually it would circle back into that, and then circle into the ball field for the future plan. But yeah, circle it out, circle it back into Cephaletta, knowing that you can circle it back out someday, back out to that road that's right beside Gene's shop.
I mean, I think the great thing is we have an immense amount of possibilities. What we can't do is do something now and then in 30 years go, oops, we need to move graves in order to make this work. So that's what I mean is we don't have to do it all today, but we have to think of it all today.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we've almost waited too late, because if you look at the map where I've been up there, I know what those are. You hardly have the space we really need to come across in between those graves. And the other thing, just as a functional part of the funeral home and the cemetery, and for people, you really have to walk a way far back in there on rough ground. If your loved one is back there, want to visit with them, that's a long walk back there. So they need the road back there so people can drive closer and then get out of their car and go do what they need to do. So that will be an advantage of that. But we're almost, if you look back at the tree line, they're getting kind of close back in there, graves bumping up against it.
You talking about here? Or are you talking about here?
Yeah, keep on going towards the pool. And the pool's that. Okay, right in there. If you look, There's right in there. There, you got the two tallest trees. It's about the only place that you're going to bring that road out through without, I think, hitting into graves according to that map.
Yeah. I think if those trees weren't there, you'd see that you've got a pretty sizable piece
right
to
where you
work
were.
with. Yeah, you got a pretty sizable piece to work with in here. I think the trees are hindering it. I also noticed if you went there, you probably saw that there appears to be some homeless issues occurring there in that little treed area.
What kind of issues you say?
Homeless issues.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me on that now.
You've definitely got some. Go ahead.
Any slightly wooded area in Georgetown has an issue with homelessness.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, you're correct.
it's that pervasive.
Mhm.
And that would be something to encourage, not that it would change the homeless situation, but as we take that green space off of Markham and use the road and grave area in that, then to put a pretty fence around that, just like we've done the rest of the cemetery, maybe not rock, but have a nice fence to go around there so that people aren't coming in off of Markham. They need to stay inside the cemetery, the two main gates to come and go.
So, your opinion, you wouldn't want another entrance on Markham.
No, not really, and I'll tell you why. Just throwing the thought out there. Is where Gene's house is. He can maintain some by seeing what's coming and going there at night. A lot of people complain about that other entrance being open at night. It just lets people get in and out of there easier to do whatever they need to do to the cemetery at 12 o'clock at night. So then you're going to have one more gate that somebody needs to see. So I would keep it contained at those two gates as you're coming and you're going in the cemetery, but make everything so that you can get around the cemetery, that all parts of the cemetery connect with the road, but just keep the two gates so that you can maintain closure at night and maintain some security inside the cemetery. We need extra cameras in the cemetery too, but that's another day.
Yeah. Well, I think this is exactly the kind of general feedback or kind of context that we can give Pat that'll really be helpful for him. Judge, Rick, Dwayne, do these conversations make sense in terms of what we want Pat Hoagland to look at for us?
Well, 100%. The area off of Markham and, that what Andrew described as the L shape, and Markham being the bottom of the L, that there is room there, but I'm kind of like, I was looking on the PVA before Andrew put up the screenshot. I don't know where we have 30 years of space left at the, I've got two on my desk right now to sign of requests for burial expenses. And that's a common, it's a common event. So I think we're wise trying to look at options now and think we should do so. It'd be doing a disservice not to look at options now.
Yeah, I agree with you, Judge. I don't think our community's getting bigger. Some of our population's getting older. Compared to the amount of funerals we do today versus what we did 10 years ago, I mean, it's a whole lot different. And so I think we're going to, and people like the Georgetown Cemetery. There's something very special, very beautiful about our cemetery, and Gene does a great job with it. And so people are very connected to it. And I guess when you have loved ones there, you're definitely connected to it. So I think it's something to really respect and to think that it's healing quickly.
No, I agree with you 100%.
Hey,
Mayor,
Mayor,
go ahead.
hey, Mayor, it's Rick. I'm just wondering that Mr. Hoagland, the landscape architect, is he part of Branstetter Carroll, or is he just kind of partnering with them?
No, he is a part of Branstetter Carroll.
Okay. I thought I'd heard that name before. I know they're doing some other work in the county, but I've actually worked with them in my line of work too. But so I think I know who that is. But yeah, he's a great guy. But he's part of Branstetter Carroll, so he's helping put this master plan together. Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
Got
sir. Yes, sir.
I guess my I want to lean on the guys that do this all the time. So,
Yeah.
The guys that are having to do these graves that know everything about our cemetery, what are their thoughts? Where do they think we can do some things? And because they have to do with the operational side of all this. along with them giving a lot of input to the master plan, and then giving us a sort of a schematic of what that might look like, then that might help me feel like I can maybe give my input. Right now I have a lot of input, mostly as just somebody that, like everybody else, loves, what our cemetery gives us. And, I'm there live, but I'm on the other side most of the time. So I'm not in this back area very much. And then I would also like to, I think we would have to think through the process of these, the type of funerals that we're talking about, where the Paupers Field, space wise and whatever, cremations and everything. I think all that has to be discussed and talked about. I don't think it has to be off the table that we have to do it a certain way. And I don't know what that is. I still do everything respectful and all those things, but what does that mean? So that's something I would like to make sure we talk about.
Mhm. That's something that's on Gene's mind too.
But
Well, and I know the judge has touched on that topic, and it's the end of life issues and burial and all of that are very, very personal feelings, and people have strong feelings about cremation or this or that, but I think Dwayne's right. We have to at least consider those things in our strategy.
I would agree with Dwayne as well, but also Judge, I used to kind of know this number, but I've kind of forgotten it. I haven't been tracking it the last year or so, but don't we run about 25 or 30, or is it more than that?
It's every bit of that. We budget about $70,000. And we were right at, we're right there since I've been judge, we're right there every year. I can get real numbers to share.
Am I close? Do you think I'm close? 25, 30, 32?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Every year since I've been on the court, I think it's been in that area, which I'll be honest with you guys. When I first saw that my first year on the court, I was a little bit shocked by that. I didn't know what to expect. Actually, I won't call it shock, but it to me, that's still kind of a high number, but it's because our community's growing and number wise. And we know that. So I don't think that's going to back off. It's probably going to maintain or even increase. I guess that's what I'm driving at.
And
It's not going to go down. Then one other option that the mayor and I've discussed is that the Masonic Cemetery and Stamping Ground. I called Mayor Murphy, and there is the possibility of room being there for indigent burials if we wanted to divert some away from the Georgetown Cemetery for, if we wanted to try to split them or something. That's something that we could discuss. I feel like I should mention that. So that's just something to keep in mind.
And I should know more about this, but what about the cemetery between Wendy's and what is it? The dealership there. Maple
Grove.
Maple Grove. I don't know enough about that cemetery, but is that just is it pretty much it's full already and shut down kind of?
no, and you're going to get a chance to learn a lot more about that cemetery, Dwayne. Since we do things as an interlocal agreement on cemeteries, that thing is currently privately owned.
Okay.
And has been for generations. It was owned by a loosely defined club, and then that went away over the decades, and then some individuals were involved. The last active individual has now passed. We've been working with his children for a couple of years for for them to sign it over to us. Its upkeep is a disgrace. There are still some live burials being done there, Dwayne, and
Oh, wow.
it scares me about if there are good records about where there may be bodies and where there may not.
Okay.
But we're gonna, right now, they're racking up very significant remediation fees from code enforcement because we have to go in and clean it up. And we offered last year to make a swap with them and just eliminate those fees if they would go ahead and it's been a long saga, but you'll learn more about it in the coming years.
Okay.
Hey, Mayor, Judge, along that same line, and I just can't remember the results of this, but the cemetery that's on US 25 south, on the right, headed towards Lexington, I can't remember the name of it. Is that still privately owned? Yeah, Crestlawn. That's still privately owned.
Yes.
I remember, just to kind of add to what you're talking about, Mayor, with the cemetery there close to Wendy's that you were just talking to Dwayne about. I remember when that came up, the previous owner passed away, and there were already problems there, and with the Crestlawn. But I remember it generated a lot of discussion from other privately owned or privately maintained, even some church cemeteries in the northern part of the county, especially, which is where I represent. I had folks contact me then. I'm just kind of spitting this out there for information. They contacted me then. Well, if y'all are going to take that one in on US 25, we want y'all to take ours in. And I actually got 3 or 4 requests or, comments from people in the northern part of the county. There are cemeteries, small ones and medium-sized ones scattered all over. That's maybe even in the southern part of the county. I don't know, but just something, food for thought. Because I understand what you're saying, Mayor, about that one that's over there. You were talking with Dwayne about. They don't maintain them, and that's part of what was going on with Crestlawn, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They weren't mowing, and they weren't putting headstones up and that kind of thing. That's my memory of it.
Yeah. I think you got it right.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm sorry, Rick.
That's okay. I'm done. Thank you.
I have a question for the judge. I'm intrigued by your idea of going to the Masonic Cemetery with some of the burials. How many do we put all the county burials, all of them in the Georgetown Cemetery, even if they happen to have lived in Stamping Ground, that kind of area? Do we put them all in Georgetown Cemetery?
That's my understanding. Yes, ma'am.
Well, trying to think on a personal level, some of the people that have spent their whole life in the Stamping Ground area, that area of living, would probably have been happier if their loved ones had been buried in Stamping Ground. So I think that's a good thought if it would work out.
No, I'll do a little bit more research and try to report to the committee the next time we talk. I'll call Mayor Murphy and look at, real dollars.
Okay. Right.
Good.
Mayor, can I share a couple thoughts and maybe a question or so?
Yes, sir.
I was on the council, Mayor, and I know you know this, and Karen probably as well, when this cemetery, I guess, was privately owned and overseen by a board, and they came to the city. They may have come to the county as well, but I know they came to the city, obviously. And at that time, we agreed to take it over. We felt like that was, certainly the thing to do. Was the community's cemetery. Obviously, it's the heart of downtown Georgetown. It's historic. It's beautiful. It's almost like a park. So I feel real good about what we did. So when I say some things here, I don't want them to sound a little harsh or anything, but sometimes, I like to look at things from a business perspective, and do they make sense? And I feel like we've already made the emotional commitment. We did that. I was a part of it, supported it 100%. But how far the question I guess I have, and I'm not sure I know the answer to this, but these are questions that I have. Like Dwayne mentioned, I want to see the experts rendering on what this thing could look like. And does there really need to be connectivity over to Markham? Because I'm in the cemetery a decent amount, and I see people walking through that I know that they're not there for the right reasons, and that makes me a little bit uneasy. And creating that additional cut through, may not be a positive thing. So that's something I do want some additional opinion on. But talking about doing away with the baseball fields, those are expensive fields. I don't judge how much does it cost today to build a new baseball field.
Oh, please no, David. I was just I was just sharing what the original phase 2 of that would be, and you're talking about a couple $1 million at minimum, in my mind, to build a new clover leaf out at Great Crossing Park.
Yeah.
And please know, I was not proposing
No,
that. I was just saying that.
I know it. And
I'm backpedaling.
all right. I'm sure we'll all get into the economics of this. I mean, that's it may not be today, but at some point, that's what you have to take a look at. What's the development cost going to be to put in the roads and the utilities and stormwater and everything that goes into it, all the planning, the engineering of something like this is going to be expensive as well. And then out of that, how many lots do you get? And at the end of the day, does it make sense? And, again, we don't have to look at everything as a business decision. You do some things just because it's the right thing to do. And I'm saying I was a big part of that when we did that. So I don't feel bad asking these questions. And that's why I'm trying to give you all a little bit of background on at least where I was. But, is it our responsibility to expand the cemetery forever? Probably not. And what do other communities do? And then we talk about the indigent or the paupers. And, in my mind, we need to transition that over to smaller spaces and do cremations. If they're going to come into this location, and to me, this is a great location for a cemetery. This is the heart of downtown Georgetown. Maybe there's another piece of property that, quite honestly, that we need to look at, that maybe we already own, that we could do the cemetery, transition those to that other location. Maybe it's Stamping Ground, or maybe it's one of these other cemeteries we're talking about. I don't know. We're just talking, and we're trying to figure out what direction. And I certainly like the idea of having Brandstetter come in and do a plan. I love to. To me, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I need to see that. And I also recognize that there's some improvements within our own cemetery that we need to make. Some of the shoulders, Karen, I think you mentioned that maybe at one of the meetings. There's a little bit of work that might need to be done to some of the roads. There's a lot of honeysuckle that's growing, in different places throughout the cemetery. Maybe there's some nice lighting that we could put out along US 25 somewhere, shining up on some trees to make it pretty. There's a lot of things that I guess we could consider doing. And I know we're just talking today, so I kind of just wanted to share those thoughts.
Thank you, David. That's helpful. And it's and I think it's consistent with the other conversation that we've heard. Because it sounds like an approach where we're going to have our expert help us look to the future and preserve those opportunities, but not overdevelop at this point in time. And certainly consider those cost considerations as we go forward. Back in the good old days, when you just had a greenfield site, you could count on about $250,000 to build a ball field. But I'm like you. I hope that's a later step that can be considered.
I want to give you all an example of how, these ball fields are still relevant. I want to give you an example of what's happened in the interaction between these two facilities. This is the maintenance garage here. That's where they keep their extra piles of dirt, and that's where they keep all their equipment, like the grader and the backhoe and things like that. Originally, I think Gene was hoping there's sort of like a built-in, future extension here that would connect back through to this part of the future part of the cemetery. Well, this red building here is a batting cage, and it was built recently. And I don't think it was built there with regard to the future plans of the cemetery. It happens. But because this property remains relevant, it will continue to encroach on what could be a future use of the cemetery. So conversations need to occur between our various departments as to what goes where and why and when. Because now if you wanted to connect up here, we'd have to do a little bit of a dance between here and wherever. In other words, it's starting to shrink. The possibilities will start to shrink the longer it takes. I think it's important that we're having this conversation now.
That's one of the, what do they call them? Found properties, Dwayne, when you get into a project, found conditions.
Yeah, a finding.
Yeah.
Some of that land is actually, I think, school property. I think home plate of that field is actually our property line. They just worked it out years ago, I believe, is what I've been told. I haven't looked at the actual lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking on the PVA picture, Dwayne, and that property line, it's running pretty close. And PVA is not always 100%. It's not always right. Where you see it on the image on the computer.
It is worth looking at those lines real quick for everybody's benefit. I'll pull it up. Where do we go here? Property search. All right, let's zoom in.
Sorry, guys, I got cut off. I'm back on.
Come on, you can do it. Give it a minute to populate the property lines there. So I'm back out just a little bit here and see if those property lines will still show. Yeah, so there's your piece right there. If that helps. That's what the city owns. And this would be, I'm assuming, what Dwayne is referring to here. Backs right up to that. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Looks like you own one of our parking lots too.
Yeah, let's go right here.
That basketball court's a fun time.
Yeah, it's interesting how these things happen over decades, and there you go. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I wonder how that happened.
How did that happen?
Well, that's
Sounded like a great idea at the time, I'm sure.
And I'm sure there was a good backstory, Dwayne. We
I'm
just
sure.
don't know it today.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, so let's talk about next steps. I'll tell you, I think the next step is that we get you guys together with Pat, so that he can share with you what he knows today, and you can share with him what you all think, and he can help shape this conversation by saying things like, well, you want to do that, but he's been out there and surveyed land. I say survey, I mean with his eyes. He can tell you, look, you got grading issues, or you got utility issues, or whatever that may affect what you want to do. But he can also give his landscape architect spin on things, if you will, to help, with flow and logistics issues. And Gene, I really would like Gene to be here. Maybe we'll pick a time when we know he doesn't have a funeral. But he is a critical element of this that we're missing right now, unfortunately. The operation is going to be a major part of anything that we do, right? It's not just about where do burial plots go and where do roads go, but how does it fit within the operation that goes on there today? So what would you all like us to do next?
Andrew, do we expect to see any preliminary ideas, or do we expect to have a meeting with Pat to give him a kind of a rehash of this information directly with him before he brings us back his thoughts?
I think that's up to you. I had kind of given him the pause button, but I can set him free. I can say, look, here are the things that have been expressed. What can you give us preliminarily?
I think when we get together with him, it would be we could move the ball way down the field better if he had benefit of Karen's thoughts and all the thoughts that we shared today about the cost value proposition that we have to look at, and just the whole ball of wax. I think if he's aware of what our concerns are and what we've spent this time today on, he can make that meeting a little more meaty and meaningful for us. May not be his final recommendations, but he doesn't have to walk in and meet us for the first time.
Okay.
I would vote for him to have some sort of, hey, what about this? Rendering some sort of whatever. He could probably take our notes and this video or whatever and probably throw something out there, and then that's where you start from. And those guys do that stuff all the time, so they're.
And the good news is I can just send him a link to this recording and he can watch the whole thing, and and he'll know.
Yeah. And then that way we don't want to have to rehash the same exact conversation, and we can start on the next phase of, the second, third series. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And of course, him seeing this video will be a big help, because I think David has got a really good point about, and Dwayne actually marrying those two ideas about giving us a couple of different renderings, or maybe 3 or 4, like have a Markham Drive entrance and don't have a Markham Drive entrance, and what those two options could look like. It seems to me like if you don't have a Markham Drive entrance, that may give us more usable ground. I don't know if that's true or not, but every time you put blacktop down, obviously, y'all know that we're going to lose things. So if he could have 2 or 3 renderings, and I bet he can, especially if he sees this video, that would, like you said, Mayor, that put us way down the road when we meet again.
Yeah, and I've found Pat to be politely blunt. If you've got a really crazy idea, he'll tell you that he thinks it's a crazy idea, but he'll explain why.
Sure.
Let me ask a question that I think might give him a little bit more clarity. Again, the issue that started this whole conversation was the fact that Pauper Field is essentially out of space. And when I say essentially out of space, I mean Gene says he's getting to that point where any more burials in that area, and he would have to encroach on the area where the road will need to go, regardless of whether you connect to Markham that little alley there that I showed you. You can't see it in the picture here, but he's got 2 more rows of graves dug closer to that area since this. And I guess the question is, do you all, is it a phase 1 issue to try to solve that by expanding that part of the cemetery, or do we want to lean on, the judge talked about the idea of being able to defer or I don't know what's the right word, to have an alternative burial location until we have a master plan? Do we want to ask him to prioritize that issue, or do we just want to let it play out?
I personally think you have to do both. I think you have to do it together. I think the judge can check about maybe moving some of them into the county. And then I think the other is you're taking to how you connect to that next piece of property. What's the best connection? And then once you figure out the best connection, then I think you can figure out where graves are going to be, whether they're pauper graves or they're just graves in general. Because I think he's running out of that space that we've designated for the pauper's grave back there, but I think he's still running out a lot of space for people in general. So kind of combine that issue, say, here's our 2 concerning issues that we need to address. And when you're looking at this, and you kind of look at them both at the same time.
Andrew, what happens in a scenario where it's cremation only? I mean, do the ashes end up in the cemetery, or do they go to a family member, or where do they go?
Well, you got two different issues there. You got with pauper burials, it is possible to have cremations. And with cremations, my understanding is typically they get buried but they would get buried like a casket. What Gene told me was, if you had a cremation, the rock shelf issue that we have becomes not an issue, because you don't bury ashes 6 feet deep. You can dig a 2.5 foot hole or a 1 foot hole and have a burial site, if you will. When it comes to unclaimed body, that is, people who die and who don't have a friend or a loved one to say, I claim this person as family or friend, those folks cannot by state law be cremated. I don't know what the portion is of those to pauper burials, but I believe it is pretty small. Judge might know better on that. I figured it was pretty small, but those folks cannot legally be cremated. So I guess, I hope that answered your question, David. I mean, it's still a cemetery burial, unless I don't know, unless the family member says we don't want to have a location in the cemetery, we'll have a urn with ashes on the mantle. I'm not 100% certain on that.
David, having gone through cremation with both of my parents, who decided prior to their death that's the way they wanted their funerals to be held, you learn some interesting things. The remains, the ashes, as people would think of it, are called cremains rather than remains. They're called cremains. And we chose to, Mom and Dad were each in an urn, and we chose to, they already own cemetery plots in the Georgetown Cemetery. So we decided to bury the urns rather than bury a casket. And there's even a phrase for that. And in a normal funeral, it's an internment to go into the ground. And what we did with my parents is an internment. when you bury the urn. But there are a number of families that make other choices scattered on a mountaintop or in the ocean. Some cemeteries, David, I've read, have set aside special areas where some ashes can be, a small amount can be shaken, and then the person can come back to that tranquil location and visit there. Or there could be a locker with a lot of remains in urns in a decorative setting. There's lots of ways that it can save space and lots of options for families.
Okay, Mayor, I appreciate that. You know, thinking about Joy's mom, it didn't even dawn on me, but they didn't have burial spots. They've got her ashes, there in Oldham County on a shelf, and waiting until her dad passes, and then I think they're going to spread those ashes. But it sounds like to me, we're at a point where we need to make a decision, and sometimes we don't want to make certain decisions that might not be in complete support, but it sounds like we're at that point. We just don't have much choice, and I feel like we've got to either transit. I think we need to pivot and do something different, and as the judge offered, maybe some of them go to a different cemetery. If they want to come here, maybe it's the cremation only. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I'll let you all find the experts and get some advice. But I don't mind to take some action. I don't mind the council, if we have to, change our policy. I don't mind to be involved with doing that, Andrew and Mayor.
David, where this is an easier conversation for us than it is for our magistrates and county judge, is they're actually responsible for indigent burials, and we're not. And so they have this issue. Fiscal court, that's just one of the burdens that they have, is they have to do this.
May I ask another question to the judge? How are you handling, since COVID, if folks die from COVID, there is money available for that. How's that working out with the indigent funerals?
To my knowledge, no one has came across my desk and been, that indigent and tagged as a COVID death.
Okay.
We've had 41 COVID related, deaths that have been related to COVID. That's been documented in that respect, in the last, since this started. And to my knowledge, none of the indigent burials have been, documentation hadn't shared it was due to COVID.
Okay.
That is something to keep in mind on.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Andrew,
a surprising statement. I'm sorry to interrupt. That's a surprising statement, Judge. Just interesting. Go ahead, David.
would it be appropriate to say, hey, starting in January or at some timeline that we need to, plan on making a change? And I don't know exactly what that is, but give everyone time to figure that out.
Why don't we see the plan first, or tentatively what the plan possibility could be before we go that direction?
I'm good with that, but it doesn't change the fact that we're essentially out of spaces based on what I heard earlier. And it would be nice to start, I guess, having some of them located in Stamping Ground or somewhere else if they could. Anything we can do to take pressure off, I think would be helpful.
Well, I still like the idea of going on to, if people are from the Stamping Ground area, seeing if they could be buried in Stamping Ground, because I think the families would like that. But as far as saying, okay, we'll do cremations or that type of thing, I think let's wait and see what he brings us for a possibility of a plan, and then go to that step.
It sounds like the judge, you may be able to have some conversations that might at the very least be an emergency relief valve.
No, I'll call on Mayor Murphy and ask for more details and report back to the group the next time we meet.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. And Andrew, so we can have a conversation with Pat. He can have access to this video, and I think there's been some pretty good input given what he already knows about the site and what he's already seen of the site. Maybe if we encourage him, we can it'll be up to him about how quickly we can get back together if we want to hear from him.
Great.
Mayor, why couldn't we go ahead and do cremation only under the circumstances that are permitted?
David, I don't know if I can force cremation. I don't know if we can mandate that. That's Andrew and I discussed that previously, and
Hey, Judge,
yes, sir.
on that topic, can't remember what county it is. At one of the conferences in the last couple of years, I talked to some magistrates. I can't remember what county. That
Probably
they're,
Boone
they're
County.
what is it?
Boone County.
Maybe, Andrew. I just can't remember. But they've been doing cremation only for a while. Now I don't know about. I didn't know to ask the question that you brought up, Andrew, about if nobody claims that by law you can't. Now that may be the case. I do not know that. I default to what you found out. But other than that, I do know there's a county out there, at least one, that's been cremating as the main option for a while now. I'm pretty sure. And I'm not sure what county it is. I can't remember.
What Andrew's saying is that if someone is found dead in Scott County, their body's not claimed, they're not identified, they don't have any next of kin,
Right.
that individual by KRS statute cannot be cremated.
Gotcha. I didn't know that, but no, I stand corrected there. But and I'm sure that county that I'm thinking of. I just wish I could remember who it was I was talking to, but I don't. I'm sure that's how they're operating. But most of the ones that I've seen come across our desk, you and I've talked about it before, and Judge Lusby and I talked about it. Most of the ones that I saw, families are involved. They just don't have the money and give them a proper burial. I'm sure there's been some. I do recall one when Judge Lusby was there that they were having a hard time finding the next kin. I don't remember how that played out, but we weren't doing cremation, so.
So if the court wanted to discuss that option, I believe the option is available. What David is suggesting that the services that the county would pay for would be a cremation only unless it is a unidentified individual. If the court wanted to consider that, they could. I would like to gather information from Mayor Murphy for prices and cost and space, and we share that information together.
Yeah, well, I was only suggesting maybe you could go to KCO or KMCA to see what other counties, if you've had that opportunity. That's you like to find the facts, and I agree with that. All options. Yeah.
And you may have some families that it is a religious thing not to be cremated. So
Sure.
I think we would honor that under all circumstances. So.
I agree with you on that respect. Yes, ma'am. But some folks it might not be, what the mayor referred to. Mayor, educate me one more time. When you inter an urn, what is it technically called?
An inurnment.
An inurnment. All right. That might not be a problem for some folks, but if it was for religious issues, I definitely would honor that in my mind. So, Well, do we have it sounds like we have a plan to gather this information, share the video with the expert and have the expert have that insight and then get back with us. And I'll get information from Mayor Murphy and share with the group as well.
I think I know what I need to know.
Sounds like a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you all for meeting.
Y'all have a great weekend.
All
All
right.
right, bye,
Talk
everybody.
soon.